They say that the first impression is the last impression. But what if everything after that first impression sucks? These infamous flicks piqued viewers' interest, only to drop the ball mere moments later. The third Austin Powers installment starts off with such a bang that it's a shame the rest of the movie can't live up to it. The opening set piece is an over-the-top action parody of Austin himself, with none other than Tom Cruise donning the shagalicious secret agent's thick glasses and 60s threads. Kevin Spacey shows up as Dr. Evil, Danny DeVito plays Mini-Me, and Gwyneth Paltrow stars as Austin's love interest. It is revealed to be directed by none other than Steven Spielberg, who responds to Austin's criticisms of the sequence by holding up one of his 3 Oscars. It all ends with an elaborate dance number over the opening credits, featuring further cameos by Quincy Jones and Britney Spears as a fembot. It's a testament to the franchise's popularity at the time that so many A-listers volunteered their talents for just a few minutes.
Very shagadelic, baby, yeah!
A weird amalgamation of Goldfinger and Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, the film finds Austin Powers traveling back in time to rescue his kidnapped father, British secret agent Nigel Powers, from Dr. Evil. When he lands in 1975, Powers teams up with American agent Foxy Cleopatra, played by none other than Beyoncé, to keep Dr. Evil from taking over the world with Goldmember, a Dutch supervillain with peeling skin and golden genitals. Although the movie has its fair share of laughs, the spark from the first 2 is missing, and the critical reaction reflects that. The success of Who Framed Roger Rabbit inspired animation legend Ralph Bakshi to try his hand at a version for adults. Unfortunately, the man who made cartoons X-rated with Fritz the Cat had lost some of his edge by the time Cool World came around. He seemed to have lost some of his skills as a filmmaker as well, since the live-action and animated elements rarely seem to be existing within the same frame. The film begins in 1940s Las Vegas, where World War II vet Frank Harris is somehow teleported into the animated universe of Cool World, eventually becoming a police detective. Flash forward to 1992, when animator Jack Deebs is released from a 10-year prison sentence. While behind bars, he created the successful comic strip Cool World, based on weird dreams he'd been having. Jack is sucked into the animated realm, where he's seduced by his cartoon creation, Holly Wood. Holly wants to become a real woman by sleeping with Jack, even though sex between doodles and noids is strictly forbidden. Although Cool World has developed a bit of a cult following, it was universally panned by critics when it was first released. Few people found much of anything to like about it, especially when held up against the near seamless integration of animation and live action in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Say what you will about Fast and Furious, the critically maligned 4th entry in the long-running franchise, but it features a banger of an opening chase scene. A bit of a retcon reset after Tokyo Drift, it begins in the Dominican Republic, where Dominic Toretto is still hiding out after the events of the first film caused him to flee LA. With the help of his girlfriend Letty and his pal Han, Dom hijacks a couple of fuel tankers by racing alongside them in his muscle car. It's a high-octane sequence that shows off director Justin Lin's talent for staging the kind of elaborate action set pieces that became the series' trademark. But things fall apart quickly when Dom returns to Los Angeles to avenge Letty's supposed death. Although it's fun to see Diesel reunite with Paul Walker as former cop Brian O'Connor, the duo's plot to take down a drug kingpin inspires few fireworks. Admittedly, the Fast and Furious series had yet to find its footing by the time this film came along. It wasn't until the next installment, Fast 5, that they ditched the formula and shifted the focus towards a found family of globetrotting crime fighters. You can see elements of the direction the franchise would take in parts of this movie, for better and for worse, but nothing Lin and company come up with can top the hair-raising heist scene that kicks things off. The overwhelming anticipation for a sequel to The Silence of the Lambs quickly dissipated the moment Thomas Harris's novel Hannibal was released. So shocking and lurid was the book's violence that director Jonathan Demme, star Jodie Foster, and screenwriter Ted Talley, all of whom won Oscars for Silence of the Lambs, declined to return for this follow-up. Only Hannibal Lecter himself, fellow Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins, agreed to appear, with Ridley Scott, Julianne Moore, David Mamet, and Steven Zaillian taking up directing, acting, and writing duties respectively.
Are you confused?
This being a Ridley Scott movie, Hannibal is nothing if not beautiful to look at, even when the content makes you want to look away. And indeed, there are many moments when the sheer craft alone may trick you into thinking you're watching a masterpiece. From the opening sequence, when the horribly disfigured Mason Verger, played by an uncredited Gary Oldman, quizzes prison guard Barney as to Hannibal's whereabouts, Scott creates a feeling of dread and unease. Aided by John Matheson's moody cinematography, Hans Zimmer's eerie score, and Norris Spencer's elaborate production design. As the film progresses, however, you can't help but sense some of the Silence of the Lambs magic is missing. Part of the problem is Moore's casting as Clarice Starling, the FBI agent tracking Lecter down as he eats his way through Europe. As great of an actress as she is, she can't erase our memories of Foster's iconic performance. Yet, critics saved their harshest criticisms for the movie's violence, which was still brutal even with massive deviations from the book. While leagues above the recent Jurassic World series, The Lost World Jurassic Park was nevertheless seen as a major come-down from its predecessor. It's easy to understand why Steven Spielberg would want to make a sequel to his monster 1993 hit, and individual sequences remind us of his skills both as a visual storyteller and as an action filmmaker. The film's opening is particularly strong. A vacationing British family decides to dock their yacht on the remote island of Isla Sorna, not knowing it's home to some of those genetically engineered dinosaurs. Their daughter wanders off and is greeted by what appears to be a friendly Compsognathus, but their interaction turns dangerous when an entire flock of the tiny predators attacks her. She survives, fortunately, but that doesn't make the experience any less terrifying. Once Dr. Ian Malcolm travels to the island at the behest of Dr. John Hammond, however, The Lost World proves that there's really no good way to make a Jurassic Park sequel, even though we got 4 more attempts at doing just that. While the dinosaurs inspired awe and wonder in the first film, here they're seen only as monsters to run away from. Given Spielberg's directorial talent, those chase sequences are thrilling. Yet, as critics pointed out, the people doing the running away are little more than dino food. Aside from Pete Postlethwaite's entertaining turn as a big game hunter who's come to the island in search of exciting new prey.
The trick is to get him to come where we want him.
Stop-motion director Henry Selick created eye-popping worlds in his animated films, The Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline. And the same is true of Monkeybone. Unfortunately, the characters he creates in this live-action animation hybrid aren't nearly as compelling as their surroundings. Part of the problem is Monkeybone himself. As voiced by John Turturro, he's a cartoon creation of animator Stu Miley, portrayed by living legend Brendan Fraser, who finds himself tormented by the claymation primate when a car accident puts him in a coma. While trapped in the bizarro realm of his imagination, Stu links up with Monkeybone to try and get back to his fiancée, only to find out the little stinker plans to use his body as a way to enter the human world. Before Stu's accident, we're treated to a glimpse of Monkeybone as an animated series, which is set to make him a very rich man. Although the raunchy cartoon is funny in short form, we soon realize that a little bit of Monkeybone goes a long way, especially when he inhabits Fraser's body. Things liven up a little when Stu, in an attempt to reclaim his life, jumps into the body of a recently deceased organ donor, played by the hilarious Chris Kattan, who keeps spilling his parts all over town. If the middle section were as good as the beginning and the end, Monkeybone might have turned out to be some kind of bonkers masterpiece. As it stands, however, it's an ambitious curio, one that appalled critics and scared away audiences. Disney's association with The Wizard of Oz goes all the way back to the 1930s, when Walt wanted to turn the book into an animated follow-up to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But the estate of L. Frank Baum had already sold the rights to Samuel Goldwyn, who in turn sold them to Louis B. Mayer, and the rest is history. That didn't stop Disney Studios from trying to make their own version of the classic book series, including the surprisingly dark Return to Oz, culminating in the critically maligned Oz the Great and Powerful.
Stop! You're hurting him.
Directed by Sam Raimi, it stars James Franco as Oscar Diggs, a traveling circus magician and con man who's plucked out of Kansas by a tornado and plopped down in the magical land of Oz. The locals think Oscar is a great wizard who's come to save them, which he decides to use for his financial gain. His magical abilities come under scrutiny from 3 witches, Theodora, Evanora, and Glinda, each of whom hopes to employ him in their fight for control of Oz. Copyright laws kept Raimi from using some of the most iconic characters and imagery from the 1939 Wizard of Oz, including Dorothy's ruby red slippers. The beginning of his film, which follows Oscar's origins in Kansas, is a callback to the original, shot in black and white Academy ratio. It's so good, it makes you wish he had the rights to make an official prequel rather than, well, whatever the heck this movie turned out to be. Tim Burton had firmly established himself as one of Hollywood's most visually inventive filmmakers by the time he took a crack at remaking Planet of the Apes. Unlike the most recent trilogy, which employed motion capture CGI to turn humans into apes, the director used practical makeup effects courtesy of Rick Baker. And this being a Tim Burton film, you know the art direction is going to be similarly dazzling. If the screenplay were up to that same level of craft, there might have really been something here. Hope springs eternal when the film opens, as astronaut Leo Davidson crash lands on a mysterious planet where humans are enslaved and apes reign supreme. There's a goofy charm to Mark Wahlberg's performance as a spaceman who goes into orbit to save his partner, a chimpanzee named Pericles, only to find himself captured by intellectually advanced primates. The ape performances by Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter, Michael Clark Duncan, and Paul Giamatti are fully committed despite being hidden under pounds of makeup. And not for nothing, but there are also some impressive action sequences. Yet, as the film progresses, you get the sinking feeling that the three credited screenwriters, William Broyles Jr., Lawrence Connor, and Mark Rosenthal, didn't know exactly what tone to strike. Worst of all, the customary twist ending raises more questions than it answers. The finished product was a critical disaster that failed to relaunch a franchise, and featured, well, this. Roger Moore's final outing as James Bond in A View to a Kill was a real low point for the series, earning some of the franchise's worst reviews. Yet, even the worst 007 outing still has a great opening sequence, albeit one with a very noticeable stunt double for Moore, who at 57 was starting to show his age. Bond is dispatched to Siberia to retrieve a microchip from a fallen agent. When he's discovered by the bad guys, he has to evade them by sledding down the icy mountain, first on skis, then on a snowmobile, and finally on a makeshift snowboard, all while accompanied by the Beach Boys' classic California Girls. After blowing up the helicopter that's been chasing him, Bond enters a hidden submarine and gets cozy with a beautiful submariner. And of course, there's the opening credits sequence, set to Duran Duran's theme song, aptly titled A View to a Kill. Bond later finds out the microchip is a product of Zorin Industries, led by the villainous Max Zorin, played by Christopher Walken doing his best bad guy act. Zorin has some nefarious scheme to become the world's leading microchip manufacturer by wiping out Silicon Valley, aided by his henchwoman Mayday. By this point in Moore's run, the series had become so campy and lightweight that it was difficult to take anything seriously. Although die-hard fans will still stick up for this film, it was clear that a massive reset was necessary to keep the franchise alive.